Hello, Business 424 students, and welcome back to the week 10 of the course. I'll just let you know this is Tuesday afternoon, March 17th, when I'm recording this, and I will post this right away after I do get it recorded. Wanted to call your attention to this particular page here, the first page of this particular set of slides, and I'm changing this a little bit from what I told you about in a video that I posted yesterday. The change is instead of calling each topic, I would have called this topic 10.1. Week 10, topic 1. I decided not to do that because it would have been confusing after all with the textbook, which also uses that decimal system, like the Chapter 10 has sections 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and so forth. So anyway, I will be, for the rest of the semester, I'll be labeling our assignments this way. So what this means is today, I'm going to talk about three topics here, and mostly I'm talking in an outline or a thumbnail sketch way of discussion. But here's how that will be useful to you. You will, by the time you view this, many of you will have already completed your assignments for week 10. You read the assignments both for the negotiating book and for the selling book. And then I'll follow this the way you would use my discussion here today is putting that in a perspective about how we some different ways we can look at that, different ways, maybe sometimes different from the way the textbook author presented it, but nevertheless a usual and well-practiced way that's used in the business world as well. After all, the process of marketing and selling is, it's a big business, but there are many different ways to approach marketing, many different ways to approach selling, and so giving you some different perspectives will help you see what is involved in that whole process. There is no one way to market. There is no one way to sell. So having an alternative, having sort of a toolkit full of tools about marketing and selling will probably be more helpful to you going forward in your careers than me just telling you that there is only one way. So there are many ways, and we'll continue to look at it that way. So this topic 1, and so we're going to do three topics, and so this is topic 1 of 3. I labeled it that way so whenever you're looking at the assignment, you know, for example, that following this, there are two other topics. It'll help you in case things get jumbled up on the Canvas site, and sometimes things move around there. This will help you keep tabs on the fact that there are 3 topics that you should be looking for and view the videos on that today. We'll start by doing some reviews, and in the meantime, I've even added another additional a slide showing the reviews of what's going on in this that's related to our topic. Let me get on with that one, and that's this. This is an overview. I think I might have posted this a couple of weeks ago on your Canvas site. But when we get into this, the review today, we'll also talk about review of Chapter 8 with the seven steps in the selling process. You know, I also want you to keep in mind that those same steps apply to advertising. They might even apply to public relations. They might even apply to sales promotion. So they apply to all the various media that are used in presenting, promoting, in sales promotion. Let's use that word to cover all those topics. But very quickly here, as an introduction to this chart of advertising and personal selling, because I'll be referring back to this from time to time, so I want to start off with it, is that let's keep it clear that when we're talking about advertising, we're talking about calling the attention to the consumer, calling the consumer's attention to a product or service through mass media, whereas in the personal selling, a sales representative is calling attention to a product to the customer directly by visiting him or her or his or her particular company, if it's a business-to-business kind of a transaction. The selling advertising plays a big role in personal selling. In a sense, it introduces the person, the eventual, if I'm a sales rep, the eventual customer that I'll be talking to may already know about the product or the service because they've seen advertisements on that, whether they're in the print media, whether they're on social media, whether they're on television or billboards or some other medium of getting a message out about a product or service. So we look at advertising as being a very helpful partner to the personal selling process. And then again, just in terms of how we'll be talking about these different functions, advertising is clearly a one-way communication, which has some weaknesses in a sense. As a matter of fact, there are many people that would say that one-way communication is kind of an oxymoron of sorts. It doesn't really communication generally means two-way. It means I give you a message and then you give me a message back. And when we have come to some agreement or we've come to some idea that we understand each other, then we call it communication. But nevertheless, most marketing books will use this kind of a treatment that we're looking at on this slide and say that advertising is one-way communication, personal selling is two-way, because a person can, you as a sales rep can make a comment to me as a customer, I can make a comment back to you, we can decide whether we're understanding each other, and we can go forward in our conversation. The form of the communication is probably one of the biggest differences between advertising and personal selling, in that advertising is impersonal. Personal selling is personal, as it says. It's a personal form of communication. It's person to person. The impersonal form of communication is that it doesn't take into consideration certain characteristics of the customer. Many people, when something is impersonal, people who aren't even customers for the product, who don't even know what the product is, are subject to seeing those advertisements. And so, in many respects, as when we think about it, on a personal level, on a person-to-person basis, advertising can be wasting the message, because there are people who don't want the product, who don't need the product, who aren't in market for the product, who don't understand it or need it. They see the form of communication about it. They watch the ads on TV. They see the billboards, so they're exposed to the communication. It doesn't really do anything for them. Whereas in personal selling, probably on a customer-to-customer basis, personal selling would be a more, I think you could say, more costly form of communication, because personal selling means bringing the sales rep in contact with a possible customer. Maybe only in that way, maybe this personal sales rep can only see a few customers in a given day. And so that would be a message, in a message to customer basis. Personal selling is quite expensive. On the other hand, it's personal, and it has more, probably has more impact. The strategies, which the pull strategy versus the push strategy, which you're probably aware of from your marketing course. I know you've all had a marketing course as a prerequisite to our course. Advertising is designed to go to the mass of customers and pull the product through the channel of distribution. So where customers, in theory, will see advertisements, they will go to their local retailer or online seller. They will request that product that they saw or request that service that they've heard about. And if their particular retailer or service provider doesn't provide it, then the customer will go somewhere else, or the potential provider might say, "Oh, okay, that's what you're interested in. Let me see if we can provide that in our store or in our service facility." So the product or service would be pulled through the channel of distribution. On the other hand, the personal selling may, in a sense, be a combination of push and pull. Advertisements are seen by customers. Sales reps then visit customers and give a little extra push to the product by giving more information, by being there personally to maybe demonstrate the product, to answer questions. But clearly, we see the personal selling as more of a push kind of strategy, and that's why sometimes when you and I have been in the market for a product, we sometimes and we deal with a salesperson for that particular product. Sometimes we feel like we feel that push a little bit. That's basically what we're talking about here. Certainly, the message content in advertising is more standardized because the message on a billboard or on a television advertisement or in a general newspaper is very standardized because the audience may be very wide array of people, young and old, and of all different backgrounds. Whereas in the personal selling, as you know, when we start talking more about the selling process, it's more customized because we know now that we don't pursue customers, put customers in our consider them as people that we will pursue in the sales process if we don't think they meet the criteria to be a customer for the product. They may not have an interest in it. They may be in the wrong age group. They may be they're in the wrong interest group. They're in the wrong demographic group for our product. So we'll see that in our discussion here later in these slides that we'll try to qualify who we give the message to, and that will be we will give a customized message to those people who meet the criteria that we think are the users of our product. The channel in our particular slide here, they talk about the mass media. So advertising takes on any number of forms as we've talked about, ranging from billboards, radio, television, social media, a big one today. And as you know, and many of you are probably getting more social media ads every day than you are any other exposure to any other kind of media. Certainly, the channel for transmitting the message in personal selling is the direct sales personnel who are involved in that. In terms of time, advertising conveys a message to many people at one time, whereas personal selling is able to convey the message to only one or a few people at a time, again, because it's targeted. And advertising, as much as product and service sellers would like to target, it's not as fine. They can't fine tune that. It's not as precise in targeting as personal selling. Feedback, certainly advertising lacks direct feedback. And now I would have to say, let's modify that a little bit. Maybe social media is an exception to that in the sense of being able to give some direct feedback immediately. And you realize this as much as I do, that social media has changed the dynamics of business, and certainly it's changed the dynamics of media. Um, we in years past we weren't accustomed to talking about social media. That's a fairly new concept, and I would say that would be, as far as this transparency that you're looking at right now. I think social media might be an exception, and it does in fact provide direct feedback in various ways. Many of the ads will ask you you can vote, you can click, you can turn it off. You don't like what you're seeing, you can unsubscribe. And the company on the other end, or whoever is the sponsor of that advertisement, gets that data. They know that you have unsubscribed. They know how you have answered. And so it's a new world when we talk about feedback and social media advertising. But yet personal selling allows direct and instant feedback right away. It's the quickest and easiest form to get really in-depth and good feedback about a product or service, about a company. If you're a sales rep and you're selling a product, representing a company's product line, you will be getting feedback from your customers and potential customers, not only about the product, but about the pricing, about the shipping, about how this product measures up to other competing products, about what we think about the advertising for this product. So here again, personal selling scores the highest in getting feedback because of it's direct and it's instant, and the sales rep can ask for additional information and get in-depth information about products, services in the company. It's also a very good way to learn about what customers think about not only our company's product, but competitors' products. So anyway, we'll refer back to that from time to time, not only in today's slides, but I just wanted to give you this, I call it a refresher course in advertising and personal selling, something that's kind of a summary of what you talked about in your marketing course, which may have been last semester, or may have been a few semesters ago. So anyway, kind of check this out as a quick overview of the differences. So mainly what I wanted to get into right now is the seven-step selling process from Chapter 8. And we've looked at that. We've talked about parts of it. I think we've kind of gone through each step, the prospecting and qualifying, and then it goes into the pre-approach, and then it goes into the approach and the presentation and the handling of objectives, closing the sale and the follow-up. Different people, as you'll find that in your careers, and particularly if you're in selling, that some people may use an 8-step selling process. Some other people may say that it has 6 steps. But in any case, this is it's a good discussion, because no matter how many exact steps there are in the process, the process is very, very similar. It starts with prospecting and qualifying who it is who wants our product or service, who can use it. We know that we'll have an easier time selling our product or service if the more details we know about who uses it, who needs it, and who can gain value from what it is we're trying to sell. The more we know that, the better the job we can do of matching our what we sell with who needs what we sell. That's mainly our goal here, is to meet the needs of our consumers. It's not to try to get consumers to have needs that they don't know they have. We're trying to find out, what do they need? And there are plenty of needs. and plenty of wants. And so what our job is in the selling process is to find out, well, what are those? What is it you want? And let me see if I can provide that for you. And that's kind of where what we're looking at in terms of our process here. It is we looked at it again and again, and whenever you go into selling, you're going to see, you'll find that this will be whether or not the established salespeople in the company that you might eventually go to work for, whether or not they use the same terms, the same language, or the same number of steps, you'll probably find that if they're successful, they probably approach it the same way. That they prospect and they qualify. They search out for potential customers and decide whether those customers have the ability and the desire to make a purchase. And of course, you remember that, or you may remember that from your basic economics course, that a qualified customer is a person who is both willing and able. So we have to find as sellers, as personal salespeople, if that's what we are, and we have to find people who are both willing and able to buy the product or service, and that includes do they need the product? So the people and the organizations that meet these criteria, we call them in our course, we call them, and in the textbook, these are qualified prospects of all the people and organizations out there, of all the individual buyers, if we're selling an individual consumer product, or if we're selling industrial products, business products, of all the businesses out there, those that qualify, that we think have the ability to buy our product, who need our product, and have the wherewithal to buy our product, the financial means to buy the product, we call them the qualified prospects. They're the ones that we want to talk to. The sooner we can identify them, the better, because we are not then, in a sense, spending money on advertising or trying to send messages or knock on doors or send emails to people who have no interest in what we do. And following in the steps, of course, we know that before making a sales call, we say it's important to do your homework, to research your customers, to plan on what you're going to say. This is the pre-approach. Give some thought to what you're doing. Do some study beforehand, and we get into probably step 3 is the approach. That's where we will meet. First, have a meeting. Generally, we'll talk about that in the sense that we think of that in the sense that it's going to be a face-to-face meeting, but we know that's not always the case. As we know now, there's much marketing and selling that is done through the social media, through telephones, through email, and so whichever means we use to approach, get in contact with people, we have to make sure we do our homework up front. And when you look at this list, I'd like to call your attention to something of 7 steps we have there. Sort of kind of the first half of the list or so. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the ones that you might call those the ones where we make an investment, but we don't get a lot of return. In other words, doing your homework, doing the preparation to meet with customers isn't selling a product. Doing the prospecting, qualifying and prospecting is probably even a better example. While we're prospecting and qualifying, we're sorting out, we're deciding who are those among all the people out there in the world, who are those who are able to buy our product and have the desire to make the purchase. That can be a tedious process. Sometimes when we have a particular, if we're too interested in getting to the customer in terms of making the sale, And if we cut corners early on in the prospecting and qualifying stage, or in the pre-approach stage, even in the approach stage, we'll be wasting our time and not putting ourselves in front of the people who are able and willing to buy our product. So those first steps, certainly prospecting and qualifying and the pre-approach, even a little bit of the approach in the third step, means, get ready. It's an investment. It doesn't pay off right away. It's at that point, the seller is a long way from closing the sale, which on our chart here is step 6. There's no quick way. Maybe here's another way to say it. There's no quick and easy way to get to step 6 without doing a lot of groundwork, a lot of spade work, a lot of homework, just a lot of work in general. So anyway, just briefly going into the approach stage is that there's where we have a chance to make a first impression by getting ourselves in front of the customer. And in a minute here, I'll talk about, on a couple other slides, I'll talk a little bit more about that. The presentation. This is one of those areas where what are you going to say? What is the salesperson going to say? If you're the salesperson, what are you going to say in this process? And one of the things here, as we know, there's a video short video I'll ask you to take a look at that's tied in with the textbook, and it's the importance of the first 15 seconds of the approach. In other words, this is the first impression. You've heard this many times when you've applied for jobs, probably particularly, but if you've sold things, also very particular in that situation as well. But it's this idea that you only have one chance to make a first impression, and that is, in this particular case, we don't know for sure how many seconds it is, but we know it's not very long, and it may be a matter of seconds. And so we'll look at this little video, YouTube video that talks about the first 15 seconds. So the presentation, also when you think of a presentation, I'd like you to think back to the last slide for a second, and that is mostly what advertising is. Advertising, the impersonal media of advertising, all of the sales promotion activity other than personal selling, let's say, and maybe social media. All of it is how do you prepare? What is your message? What are graphics are you going to use? Thinking kind of similar to Super Bowl advertising, which a lot of people that don't watch the Super Bowl always like to watch the advertising because it's some of the most creative form of advertising that you see in a year sometimes, and it's a way for companies to kind of try out their creativity or kind of stretch the limits on how they like to be creative. But in any case, that's all presentation. That's all presentation. They're really taking a chance there. So if you're putting advertisements on the Super Bowl, you realize that the demographic group is all ages. It's all genders. It's all nationalities. It's all income groups. It's all everything. So the presentation there is while entertaining to some people and informative to some people, others, maybe they didn't like it, or they have their own additional thoughts. Don't think much of it. Everybody, you're gonna have people giving different impressions of seeing the same ad because they have they're different people, and a generalized presentation was directed to them, directed the entire audience of watching the Super Bowl. Going down through the process, and this will be in future weeks, we'll talk more about the presentation. We'll talk more about handling objections. We'll talk more about closing the sale, and we'll talk more about following up. But again, let me call your attention to the idea there that that the first part of somewhere like the first three, maybe even getting into the first four steps, a lot of work that you don't really know how it's going to turn out. And so I call that kind of, that's the investment you put into the process of selling. And the last steps, maybe including overlapping with the fourth step and going down to the follow-up, that's where you really, that's where you make, that's the profit. That's where you make the money. And what I'm assuming here a little bit is that during the presentation, when you, as a salesperson, have presented the product or service, you made the contact with the customer, this would be the first time that you've been face to face with the customer. This is the first time you're going to have that feedback. That personal selling is the only selling form that provides that personal feedback. That's when you'll start getting the feeling, yes, this person wants my product. Yes, this person is willing to pay our price. Yes, this person is going to be ready to close the sale if we don't have too many objections to deal with. So anyway, there's another quick overview, and I think in terms of if you're going into a selling position, you are, and you know, as we've talked about it in class, that sometimes selling is not only about selling a product or a service, but it's you selling yourself in the job market. And of course, you also know that from your textbook, which has the last section of most of the chapters has selling you, about helping you to navigate the career path that you have ahead of you. So this is one of the selling process. If you were to have when this course is finished, and you're deciding if I could have a few index cards of key ideas that I can take with me from this course, and I just I could take forward with me into the future. This would be one. This would be something to pull out of your pocket occasionally when you need to pull it out of your your backpack. I was going to say briefcase, but I don't even have a briefcase anymore. I use a backpack. So backpack, briefcase, whatever. Wherever you carry your extra papers, your calendar, if you have one of those, but again, you probably do that on your phone. Maybe you could put this steps of the selling process on your phone as notes or something. This is that kind of information, something to refer back to. It is a logical step of a sequence of activities that you can use when you're selling yourself in a job, selling a product or service, or selling an idea when you're at a meeting with the boss. Okay, so that's kind of what that's about there. So let's go to the next. This is another way, and this might have this has a little bit more information. This might be a good add-on to the previous list of selling process steps, in that it has the key words there: identifying potential buyers, determining if they are ready and willing to buy, preparing and researching before the sales call, the approach, the first few minutes, the presentation, where you really get into the offering the product or solution. You're not, in a sense, selling a product or service. You are providing a solution to the person who you're speaking to. They have a need. You have a solution. Think of it that way. And then, of course, again, there's the handling of objections, and those could have anything deal with anything from price to delivery to with changes, with some of the things that are happening in the world and in the economy today, hesitations or concerns the prospect may have about the product. Business is slowing down. The objection, business has slowed down, and it is this is something that we were all, everybody, it turns out that everybody in the world practically is dealing with the same problem, the slowdown in business. So this is a new issue that will come up for salespeople in terms of handling objections. Somebody now, one objection might be, well, I'm not really sure what my business prospects are now because I had to cut back hours, I had to lay off employees, so I don't know if I need this product or now, so I don't know if I want to place the order for this product right now. So salespeople, if you are out there, and again, we know this may be a sales call by telephone. This whole virus situation may put many salespeople on the phone, and if we're doing this, dealing with this problem for a few months, over a few months on the phone as a salesperson, you may gain some pretty good phone skills that when this problem we're dealing with is cleared up, you've developed into a pretty good salesperson over the phone, and maybe you can handle objections and handle sales, and you may have found a new career niche for yourself. But in any case, overriding all of these steps in the process here, in the 7 steps of the steps of the selling process, we can even go back to step number 1. Somebody who would ordinarily be a potential buyer may now, because of the situation that we're faced with, it could be a personal situation or a business situation, they are no longer, or at least temporarily, not a potential buyer. Okay, so we need to think about those things and think of how things have changed so quickly, so dramatically, and so quickly. Anyway, that's a key point, and I think you got the point. The 7 steps of selling. That's what our course is based on. And then with that, of course, is you will see the video this week, or the lecture this week on the negotiating for success, as we do in our course in Business 424. Is we take the selling process, and we're looking at that through the eyes of negotiation. And again, I think what we need to negotiate, what the trade-offs are at any particular time, are a function of a lot of things, including whatever issues are going on in the world today. So again, when I get into talking about negotiating for success, that'll be in topic 3. You'll see that as the 3 of 3 topic. I'll address that. I'll address that issue. We know that we've talked about. Remember, we talked about in class right before, I think the class session before you took the midterm, was the talking about the buyer persona. And this is the identifying the ideal prospect who this would be something that we would do back in step 1 of the selling process. So we talked about the buyer persona, and that's a fictional character that represents an actual person that is the ideal prospect. And I thought that that in these slides and in all the slides, what I'm doing is I'm going through and kind of calling out. I'm going through and picking up those. I think are the main topics that I want you to get out of this course, and I want to lift these topics out of the various chapters, and in a sense, by the end of the course, and in the process of the final exam, for example, we'll be going back to these. So I may as well go ahead and mention that now, that the way for you to prepare for the final exam will be to spend more effort on going through these voiceover PowerPoint slides and perhaps less on the textbook. So if in terms of putting your emphasis, put your emphasis on these particular slides and topics. The book has a lot of material in it. It's a lot of good material in it. A lot of it, some of it is repeats from other courses you've had. So I've tried to pull out the topics that I think that will be things that you can carry forward with you and use them in other places. Use them even if you don't go into selling, you'll still have to sell somebody on something sometime. You'll have to sell your house sometime. You might have to sell your boss on a new idea. You will use these selling steps sometime, and it will be a good use of your time to get a handle on these. So identifying the ideal prospect, and we talked about that again. A fictional character that represents an actual person, that is the ideal prospect. And I think a way to think about this, other than making up the little biographical sketch that's presented in the textbook, which by the way is very good. That's a very, very good method, and certainly that should be a part of it. But you think about this fictional character, and you think about the person